we're going to get started. You are at IGDA Twin Cities, and there's a ton of new faces. So just want to let everybody know we meet on the second Wednesday of every month now, right here at the Nerdery. And you can go ahead and mark that on your calendar. We already have our speakers for next month. Big John, there they are, hiding out. I'm going to talk about their new DS and Wii games that are going to come out right about that time. The whole shoot and match art and design and coding and a little bit of everything, okay? And then and something kind of unique, and we'll probably cover that more on the website when we get more details, but a cool collaboration they're doing with UW Stout. What else can we say here? We have a brand new domain, and we're shifting everything over to that, and I'm going to let Jackie talk about that. I lost her.
Right here.
Hello.
Hi, I'm Jackie. I just wanted to let you know we've moved away from the wiki that's on the IGDA.org, and we now have a new website, IGDATC.org, and we'll have all of the announcements for the events and reviews of events, pictures, if you have pictures that you take or whatever, video, that will all be linked from that website. Thank you also for signing up on Eventbrite and to helping us rebuild our email list. And also, Ryan and Tori and myself are doing a monthly podcast where we talk about some various things that are happening here with our chapter. So take a listen. And that's all I got. Thanks.
Okay. And then
Make sure the wiki links to that site.
Yes.
it does as of this morning. Yep. And we're going to do all the fancy Google shenanigans to make sure it gets a lot of page rank. And no matter what you type in, I'll take you right there. And we're to continue to announce on Facebook and Twitter. I know because I did it. Jackie was in Africa. It didn't quite go smoothly this month, but in the future it will.
It's awesome.
Yeah, okay, good. And then just a couple announcements about upcoming things. You want to do yours first?
Sure. Yeah. Do you want me to?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm Marty. So Mobile Twin Cities, I don't know if anyone knows about that, but they're a local mobile user group, kind of developer group, and they've got this upcoming thing, Mobile March, it's in March 19th, and it's like a whole day conference. There's a developer track, and there's a, I don't know what the other track is, like some kind of, owner type entrepreneur track or whatever. It's pretty cool. I went last year. This is only the second year, but anyway, now they're doing something slightly different than the night before. They're having what they're calling 3D, which is demos, dinner, and drinks. And they're looking for people to demo. So if you have like any mobile projects that are really cool, I guess you can contact me or like Justin Gramit's the guy who runs it, and I think he's just Justin at recursiveawesome.com. But yeah, or talk to me and I'll let you know all the info and stuff. But they're looking for people to demo. So, and it's a cool event. I think it's like $40. There's a price, but you can actually just do the dinner for like $10. I don't know. That's it. Thanks, Zach. Appreciate it.
And then I got asked to announce to everybody there's a new Connect user group that's starting up next. Let's see, the third Thursday, so that's a week from Thursday, a week from tomorrow. And it's this link is absolutely atrocious. The Minnesota calendar, MN Tech, or what's it called? Tech.mn. Tech.mn. It's on that calendar along with us and everything else you'd ever want to do. So that's a week from Thursday, and that's also the local XNA user group, if that's more your thing. I think that's all we've got. So without further ado, hand it over to Sandra. Round of applause, please.
I was thinking of not using the mic and just talking like this. So if I do that, can you hear me?
In the back?
Yeah? You're good? I can talk loud, can be obnoxious. Because if I like to use my hands, and if I do that, I might throw this at somebody. So that would be bad news. And this is a really dark game, so some of these snapshots will be hard to see unless we...
There we go.
Okay, of course things always look much better here than they do there. It's an unfortunate side effect of the projector, but... So, hi! Sandra Voelker. Don't know, I've done a presentation once before with this group for Dead Space 1, so I don't know if any of you were there for that. I live and work in the Twin Cities area, but I have my office where I actually sit is in Minneapolis, but I work out of offices all over Beijing, Shanghai, Montreal, San Francisco, Paris, and sometimes Buenos Aires, Argentina. So being that the virtual world as it is, as long as you have a desktop connection and webcam and all that, you can be anywhere. So I'm a technical artist, which means that oftentimes I'm just told to make things work. So people will present me an option, they'll be like, we have to make this character smarter, faster, better. And now you have to figure out how we're going to do that. So that's a lot of what a technical artist does, including like pipeline support, making sure everyone gets the tools that they need, making sure as they get stuff done that the budgets are met, not so much financial budgets, but memory budgets, cycles, kilobytes, space on disk, that sort of budget. And then quality control, making sure it works, and just generally a problem solver for the team. I originally went to art school, Ringling School of Art and Design in Sarasota, Florida. And so I went, have a computer animation degree there. It's one of the first classes that actually graduated with a degree in computer animation, not graphics or just animation. So it was really worked well for me. Graduated in '95. Got a job in LA working in film. Went to Rhythm and Hues and Industrial Light and Magic. Both great companies, but they were in California. My family and everything is in here. I'm born and raised in St. Paul, so wanted to come home and found it hard to be working in film and live here. So through conversations with some friends of mine trying to figure out a solution, unbeknownst to me, one of those conversations was forwarded to the head of recruiting at Electronic Arts. And then next thing you know, I'm getting an email from recruiting at EA saying, we'll let you work off-site, come here, come here. So games, okay, really hadn't, but that's cool. So ended up talking to them, and it's been an 8-year relationship now, actually 8.5. I've been working for EA, and I've been off-site for about 7 of that. So it's been working, so that's good. Keeps me employed, so that's good. And I get to live here, so that's good. Going to art school originally, sometimes I wish I had a little more, I could paint and draw a little more than I do, but you kind of weigh what you can do versus other life priorities. So I've gotten more technical, more programming, more pipeline with Excel sheets and stuff that I originally thought I would as an artist in art school. But it's still fun, still challenging, still get to make things cool. So that's me. Moving on. In case you don't know, this is Dead Space is a rated M mature game. The red is not showing on this monitor at all. There's the word rated M in big red letters there. So I'm a little concerned with how my graphics will look without red, but okay. So anyway, so in case you don't know what the game is, can we still have video and sound or no? That's okay, it's just music. The world is a vampire. But Isaac will save you. No, nothing will save him.
I'm going to turn this one down.
So this is the demo we released right after the game came out, so it's the latest one.
Besides, we got a better chance if we stick together. Not a chance, Isaac. All the people, just a lot of thoughts. Isaac, I know you're confused right now, but you gotta trust me, okay? You're a terrible, terrible team.
How many of you have played Dead Space 1 or currently have Dead Space 2? Dead Space 2 people out there, they already own the game, maybe flirted with it a little, no, just a couple? Okay. Okay. So that way if I start describing stuff in Dead Space 1, I can assume whether or not you know it, or 2, if you've even seen it yet. So, yeah, so it's a very violent game, as you can see, but it's a lot of fun. It's a horror-based action, sort of a horror action game. Say that again. No, but you run around and dismember lots of aliens in different space environment, and I guess if any of you have played it, play it and find out more. I'll talk more about it here too. So, yeah, so I've done a presentation for you guys before, and I got a critique that I wasn't technical enough. So I'll try to get a little bit more technical with y'all, but I don't want to bore people to death either and start rattling off numbers and budget reports and everything. So I'll try to get a balance here. But this is for you guys, so let me know, raise your hand, ask questions, interrupt anytime, okay? And also, of course, I'm going to talk about what I know best, my part of the pipeline. There's areas that, of course, I'm not familiar with as much. I mean, there's 187 people on our team, so I can't know what everybody does, but yeah. So what I do know well is the production process. So a lot of what I do is pipeline, making sure everything comes down the pipe and is getting to the people and is getting done and problems are being solved. So I go into that a little bit. And being a technical artist, I work more with the creation of assets like the character and the environment assets. So, and then hopefully give you time for questions. So, so how do we keep all this under control? We have all these people trying to work together to get all the work done. So let's see what we can do. How many people do we have? I actually asked this for HR because I wasn't sure myself. So this is the numbers that they gave me. So Redwood City, California is our main headquarters office. But we have a satellite of me in Minneapolis, and there's a satellite technical artist that works in animation who lives out of Salt Lake City. Other than that, that's our United States team. And we have Montreal, Melbourne, Shanghai, and Beijing. And the UI, there's a couple artists that we hired just out of Buenos Aires that do UI for us, but they weren't on this list. They did good UI work. So I thought first I'd talk about the environment team structure, because if we have a total of, I added it up here, what did I say? Yeah, over 60 artists together trying to get all these assets. That's a lot of people to try to manage to make sure we're going in the same direction. So how did we organize those people? So in this little diagram I drew up, we have different colored little squares. So the white ones are our off-site teams, or our Asian partners, for environments that are based out of Shanghai. And they have their environment artists that spoke usually minimal English, if any English. And they'd have their own sort of level designer that would work with them, making sure that they're meeting expected goals with a pod lead. Now this pod lead usually has to speak pretty good English and also translates documents and stuff for everybody else. And he's our main contact that we work with. So then, of course, you have a mirror structure in San Francisco. So this is the San Francisco artist. And for a pod lead is what we call a person in this group here will be in charge of a particular zone in a chapter. So like if it's the hospital sequence, if you've played the game, I'll kind of talk about that since that's the beginning of the game. There's a whole bunch of textures and environments and things, of course, that relate only to a hospital that later on when you're in the government sector or you're in the preschool, you wouldn't need. So they organize these pods based on the type of asset environment you're building. And so these guys together work with their pod lead. Their pod lead then sends, once he gathers all this and he gets what he gets done, he then goes and talks to the assistant art director. And these guys go back and forth a lot to make sure that does it look right, is it meeting expectations as far as design, gameplay, flow through, things like that. Once he likes it, then it'll go to the actual art director, who takes a look and agrees or disagrees or comes back with feedback. Of course, that's all just on the art side. Then, of course, you have myself, or there's a couple other associates of mine, who will look at these assets coming from the pod lead and will say, are they clean? Would they crash the game? Do they fit our budget specs? Do they have the right size textures? Are there any errors, bugs, issues? And so we're looking at that at the same time the art director is saying whether or not he likes it. So I'll work a lot with the San Francisco leads as well as the Shanghai leads. So it doesn't matter where I am. I'm doing 50-50. So I'm working California time part-time, and then I'm working my evenings and nights once the kids are in bed. It's like 10, 11 o'clock. I'll have to take the computer out, set it up, take an hour or two in Shanghai time in the evenings. So, but that way I don't have to get to work till noon, and I make it my 2 hours at midnight. So, you know, the time's flexible, and it works out well. So there'll be a lot of different, this is an example of one little pod might have 3, 4, maybe 5 if it's complex, but then there's multiple pods for different sections. There'll be a pod for the hospital, there'll be a pod for the government sector, there'll be a pod for the school. So characters are a little different because it's a lot smaller team. Yeah, sorry, question.
Yeah, I had a question about having such diverse areas with artists, especially for environments. Is it difficult to accomplish art style consistency?
A lot of concept work is done, and I'll show you some snapshots. There is amazing. We have full-time concept artists, and then when we get into production and we're sending a lot of work off-site, we have contract concept artists too, and it's just like folders and folders of all these amazing drawings. So a lot of that happens there. I'll go into more detail with that too, but we do some spatial relationships, sort of we call them block worlds, where they're just cubes in a space that you can rock around that are done in ears so that to get a general volume feel of the space before it goes to Shanghai or Montreal. So, yeah. But characters is a little more linear based pipeline because, of course, you have to have a model before you can have textures, before you can rig, before you can animate. Environments are a little more freeform in the sense that you can be building a table before the room is done for the table, you know. So that's why they have a pod structure. But characters we set up a little bit differently. But again, we have 2 teams. We have a team based out of, this is Beijing. Ironman's to Shanghai. For me, it's all the same. It's a time zone. But and then this is the San Francisco studio. So rather than having an ADD, we have this one gal we call the character craft director. And she is an amazing artist. She can do models, and what's really neat with her is she is this little, tiny, petite little French girl. Her name is Veronique, and she talks with this accent, and she's so cute, but then she talks about, oh, the blood and guts that are coming aren't morphing quite right because of the spew of the acid would feed through the glutamus maximus, or whatever. Like, the words coming out of the girl sometimes just don't fit, but she's really amazing. So she'll be doing a lot of the directing. She's always sitting there with pictures that you don't want to see, referencing car accidents and hospital surgeries and things, as well as there's anatomy books and referencing things like that to build some of these monsters and characters. Because we have lots of corpses in our game, so that's just straight human anatomy. But we also have with a lot of the necromorphs. The idea is that they're based on morphed human anatomy, so they have to feel somewhat like the right muscles are in the right place. So she does a lot of that. Anyway, and so if it's a character like the player, who you see a lot, or if it's a boss hero monster, enemy, somebody that needs this, it's not going to be easy to do. It's not a formulaic package. It's not like the 101 people we have running around in the game, right? Or another corpse, another corpse, another corpse. So if it's going to be specific, it's usually kept in-house here, because then they can work with her more every day, one-on-one, same time zone. If she approves it, then it goes to the art director. Okay, so that's for more detailed work. But we have a lot of characters in the game that are just people running around. And that's one thing about Dead Space 2 versus Dead Space 1, is that they wanted to keep it a very livable space. Because before, in Dead Space 1, you were on a spaceship that had pretty much everybody had died and there was just aliens everywhere. This is supposed to be in a space station where there's still kids in school and people in the hallways and people in a movie theater and things like that. So we needed to build a lot of characters. So we got a lot of help from those guys. And also, since we already had established monsters, like some of those slashers, we call them the necromorphs, if there was just a variety of a very similar design, and again, minimal risk, we were able to send it to them. I don't work with these guys too much. I'd be working with the lead, who speaks English. He's a great lead. He's actually Indian, and he speaks like 4 languages. But, and he also does a lot of the translating. So Veronique and I will be working with Salil, and he'll be sending things all over to the Beijing artists. And so he sent it to us. If I like it, it technical checks, it's not broken. She likes it, it's pretty, it works. Send it to the AD, he likes it, it's pretty, it's done. So that's kind of how that flow is. And then it goes to the next step in rigging, and then the next step is animation, and then the next step is hopefully getting it in the game. But that's the idea. So I guess I kind of talked about this a little bit, but things that we learned, Dead Space 1 was pretty successful, but we felt, whoops, it could have been more successful. Like any business, of course, you want to improve on what you got and make it better. So from negative reviews, and from people telling us what they thought we could improve on. We took a few like action items away, and there's more than this even, but there's some of the things I might touch on a little bit more. And that was, it was constant on horror experience. You're playing the game, you never felt like you got to relax. There's always things coming at you, always go, 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 ah! And eventually people just had to put the game down and just leave it because it was too intense all the time. So for Dead Space 2, we have very intense moments, but we also try to break it up with moments of just atmosphere, just environment. You know, you can relax, you can take a scope of, okay, I got my gun, what's my ammo, go to the store, buy what I need to buy. You know, it's not always go, go, go. But then also, okay, but we wanted to have it more, a little more action game too, as far as like more character development, more communication, a more clear storyline, because if you go with pure horror, then that limits our sales market as well. And of course, we want to package up games and sell them. So people that would like the horror experience, but also like a little more going on storyline, when everything would go for the action game. So one of our problems that we had in Dead Space 1 is it was a great game, but it was a very rentable game, unfortunately, because we didn't have a multiplayer. And the idea behind that was, is you're alone in the ship, and it's just you, and it's more scary that way. But in the end, it got to be where we didn't quite sell as many units as we were hoping, because that tended to be not, I mean, once you conquered it, there wasn't enough incentive to go back and play it again, to play it with your friends. So that was a really big thing that we wanted to add this year. Environment's more livable, as I stated already. And Isaac, the problem with him is I read an article that said that he was a mindless, dog like fetching things. Like he was a silent gopher, you know, like, yeah, he was sent a silent errand boy. He was sent on errands left and right and didn't really have a personality. So in order to get that, we needed to take off his mask. We needed to be talking, we needed to get to know this character more. And then also, there's just more and different kinds of enemies. A lot of those slashers, okay, they're great, but you know, give us more. So those last 2 points I'll actually go into in a little bit more detail.
Rivet Gun 3000, new from Timson Tools. Enhanced heat sink technology allows for faster firing rates and hotter pellets. Handy in every situation, from heavy-duty ship repairs to light hull patchwork. Never a spacewalk without one. Remember, safety should be on unless in use, and never point live mining tools at people or ship hulls.
Ha 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 ha. Of course, that's what you do in this game, is you kill people. So anyway, that was supposed to get a chuckle. Thanks. Hey, there you go. So Isaac talking. How are we going to get him to talk and still keep within our budgets and limitations and all that? So in Dead Space 1, I think people tended to forget, but you actually did see his face a couple times, right at the very beginning and right at the very end. So he actually did have a face, but except for making a very scared expression at the end and looking around a little bit at the beginning, he really didn't have a fully animatable face with bones and structure and expressions, and that's always a challenge in video games, is trying to get that good, real, feel, living face. So we had to try to improve on that. So of course, in order to do that, we have a lot more joints and a lot more polys. And that's fine, but you still have only so much size of a suitcase. You still have to fit it all into the same little package. So we're going to have to make compromises too. If we want that, then what do we compromise on? So one of the things that we were able to figure out, or able to advance on, was how to get this face that had a whole bunch of textures assigned to it, each of which had, not everyone had a shader, but there'd be like 3 of these equal to shader. And there'd be a shader for the eyes, a shader for the eyelash, a shader for the face, a shader for the hair. So in order to give us more room for animation and articulation, we took his whole face, we made it one shader, we took his hair, we made it another one. So that brought our texture count down significantly. But that also meant that we had to design shaders that were more robust, that could handle eyelashes and eyes and skin as one function and not have to be separated out. So, yes, an animation. So how do we show his face? You can't play an action game and have all your guns if you're busy carrying your helmet around all the time. So we want it, but you can't, it's not rocket science to know that your faces are hard and they take a lot of time and effort. And so you put a mask on somebody and then you don't have to deal with that problem. So we do still want them to have a mask in many situations, but we have to be able to take it off. So what do we do? So the idea was, and plus we want to improve on the design, have it be more futuristic, have it be, the next generation of Isaac gear. And so we figured, well, as the storyline goes, he was in a crazy war, not feeling too well, sort of out of it for 3 years. So between the first game and the second game, there's this amazing technological advance where your suit can actually hold helmet and gear for you. So that was the idea. And okay, great. So that's the idea. Now, how do you execute? And then they go to like people like me and the animation tech lead and stuff, and we try to figure out how can we get. I thought if I just clicked on it, you'd see it again. Yeah. So that all those pieces can come together in a conceivable way. Whatever you saw it the first time. Can I just click on it? There we go. And so yeah, you see there that in order to get the animators to be able to work the way they wanted to work, we had to have 832 different joint controls, different handles and things so you could grab just the way you wanted to do and grab it and move it. But then they would just correlate by a certain percentage. Like if you move this joint it only can correlate to a percentage of what the game controls were. So in the end for the game we only had 170 because joints are also really expensive to calculate all that animation. So yeah?
How many joints total for the character?
Hold on. Okay, so yes.
Does the mesh for the head still remain within the game when the helmet is covering it, or is that?
No, we turn it off. Yeah, we have lots of things that we swap in and swap out, and I'll go into that too. And that's a whole system based. But
You didn't use any blend shapes for the helmet animation at all?
nope.
So
As it comes down,
scaling down to zero.
It comes down, and then it sort of just pops off when it goes to the right space. So, yeah, we have very, very few blend shapes in the game because they get real expensive real fast. So, and actually, yeah. So, yeah, another goal we had was more characters, more enemies, coming at you, and the variety of enemies. So that made, of course, a lot of, our concept artists were having a lot of fun with that. See, I kind of lost my notes off. That's okay. All right, I'm winging it now. So, yeah, but there was a lot of great designs that were unfortunately thrown out because it's like it had to meet certain criteria. It had to be fit into the Dead Space world. Like there was a lot of drawings that were kind of like fish-based, like squids kind of, or jellyfish and things like that. And getting tangled in jellyfish tentacles while they're stinging you and hurting you could be a cool way to die in this kind of game, but unfortunately that didn't sort of fit. Well, yeah, let me take that back. But but didn't fit the whole idea of a human being taken over by a creature. So they had to be sort of more human-based. So that was unfortunate because there's a lot of great designs, yeah. And then not only human-based, but then they had to make a new type of gameplay. So something that would be strategic to try to, part of Dead Space is the strategic dismemberment. So you can't just shoot randomly nilly-willy, you have to shoot them in certain spots. For example, for those of you who don't know, if you do know, sorry, I'm telling you again, but so if an alien's coming at you with his claws and stuff, right, and you just shoot him, let's say, in the head, he doesn't die. In fact, now he can't see you, so he's going to come at you even faster, right? Versus if you shoot him in the leg, okay, he's coming at you with only one leg, but it's slower at least. You shoot him in the other leg, okay, you got him. But if you just shoot him in the belly, it does nothing. So you have to aim at the right spot or it gets tougher. So when we're building these characters, we had to think, okay, so how would you strategically dismember them? What about this character would make it a unique challenge to defeat? So that became an issue. And then, another part of the game was that we had a little bit in Dead Space 1, but we really took further in Dead Space 2, was that enemies contain their own weapons that you can shoot back at them. So a lot of these slashers would have really sharp knives at the end of they're running at you like this. And if you shoot off both legs, that's great, they're down. But sometimes they'd still crawl at you, depending on the slasher. They'd still crawl at you, right? And if you shoot a claw off, well, now you have this really sharp claw, because when you dismember them, of course, you've got body parts everywhere. But you could actually grab and stab back at them. So if we were making new enemies, we wanted to have something that would go with that idea, that concept. So they had to have maybe a sharp claw or a bunch of goo that explodes or something that could be used as a weapon. So with those ideas in mind, character concept wasn't, you can't quite go just anywhere with it. You have to keep within the realms of possibility. So one of the creatures that was an early creature that everyone was really excited about was the puker. So the reason why he was particularly kind of a good idea is he met the criteria I just discussed, because he has the 3 legs. So he's not going to just walk like your typical slasher, right? He's going to have the 3rd leg, so he's going to have a totally unique animation set. So you're going to actually see that he's coming, and even from a distance, recognize it as something new. He's still kind of human-based, so it looks like he kind of could have come from a person, a very unhappy person, but and then also the unique sort of he's got really sharp claws. Notice, but they're not the typical single knife of most of our slashers. They're actually kind of have multiple blades. You know, they're kind of maybe 2 or 3. So that way, when you grab them and throw them back, you have it's like a pitchfork rather than just a knife. And then the other is, the idea is he's ate some really bad food, and it's eating him from the inside out. So he needs to be dissolving or being, not good. But then he also, of course, doesn't like this, so he wants to get rid of this food. So therefore, as his name says, he pukes it out. So he pukes out this acid bile sort of stuff. So as far as gameplay is concerned, you can actually get a little bit closer to him than maybe you could something that was shooting a gun or something at you, or various laser beams that get shot by other creatures. But not as close as you could get a slasher, because he doesn't have to contact you directly with his blade, because he does sort of project his puke a little ways out there. So it was an interesting game feature challenge to try to beat him. So what do you make a puker look like? Okay, so yeah, how much is dissolved, what's not dissolved, how much of his legs should be tentacles. Yeah, so unfortunately, if we had red, there's some really bloody red stuff going on here, but maybe come back around later, you can see it looks a little better. But so then this was the final design front and back, what ended up going into the game. But you're creating more characters, that's fine, more variety. But another thing we had to do in the game was actually be able to fit more characters into a tighter budget, because I think last time, I don't know if I'm going to get my numbers right, but we could have like 5 or 6 enemies in a level, but they wanted to double that at least. So while you're in a space, they wanted to have 10, I think. Yeah, I got to double check my numbers, but it was a lot more. So that way you could be in a room and you could have just hordes of creatures coming at you. Well, that means, of course, each creature has to have less draw calls, less texture space, you got to fit it all into that same suitcase. So yeah, now we have a 3rd leg to deal with. Now we have a 3-prong instead of 1 prong. You know, how are we going to get this all and have it be less texture space? So.
Was that ZBrush or like just?
Those are illustrations. This is ZBrush though. So then what we do is, with all the concept that we get in, is our next step is we have a fantastic ZBrush artist, and he's also he's a modeler, but he also really can manipulate ZBrush. So he's a great guy to have, because you'll let him loose with his non-logical polygon mind, and he'll get in ZBrush and he'll make these billion poly objects, and it'll just look amazing. This is one of the snapshots of him. But then he also is aware enough of the actual game budget limitations, so he'll take this artwork once it's approved, and he can bring it down to an asset that actually is, game reasonable. So, and as you can see here, we were at 8,000 poly tries, so we had to limit it to 3 half K textures. So that would be like one normal spec and color. That's it. That's all we could have. And then 150 joints if it was a human, like an NPC. Like a person, just average Joe running around in the screaming help. And then 200 joints if it was one of these slashers enemy types. So.
Did you have to keep them 512 for like the runtime budget, or was it a space thing?
The game just, on runtime, it handles powers of 2. It has to be a power of 2 texture. I'm not exactly, it's always been a rule since I've gotten into the video game world. Yeah, it's like 64, 32, 256, yeah.
Well, 512 to me, just like,
it's really big? Or?
No, it's really small.
Yeah.
So that's what I was wondering.
Yeah, last year, here, right? Well, last year we had a 1K, Dead Space 1, we had a 1K texture plus at 512. And this year we had to bring it down to single, fortunately no red, but a single 512 texture. So, of course, it's disappointing to have to do that, But we did a lot of tests with our guys, bring the texture down, and we found that first of all, a lot of times when they were even a reasonable distance from the camera, they were getting nip-napped one step anyway. Okay, because you don't ever really see 1K. That's really in your face. That's pretty big. And then also, if you're going to be fighting 10 monsters coming at you at once, are you really going to be looking at every little detail close up? You know, you're just going to be shooting and hacking and going and, you know. The only time that it got to be a little bit disappointing was if once you're done with the mayhem and there's limbs and parts all over the place, and you pick up one, like you're going to throw it, or you could pick it up and bring it right up to your face and look at it. And of course, if you did that, where you have a piece of a leg full on camera, you might notice a little pixelation. But nobody does that, right? So don't do that. But yeah, it's a little disappointing from an artistic point of view to have to make those cuts and limits, but you're able to get stuff in the game that way. And it's exciting to have new characters when they're working. Yeah.
Talk a little bit about how you determine what those budgets are going to be.
We get boxing gloves on, and we all sit in a room, and we punch each other. No, actually, I am not. I'm the technical director. Usually, is sort of my boss on the technical side, and he's more really aware of visual effects needs and sound needs, and he's more higher up. So he kind of the one that he talks to us and says, "What do we plan on doing?" And we're fighting for this because we want this. Because you know what? If you put that hand right in front of the face, it has to be pretty. And he's the one that's going, "I'm sorry, but we need this for environments. We need this for sound. You know." So you're going to have to go with that, you know. And so we'll do tests too, and we'll show them, well, if you're going to have us do that, it's going to look like that. You know, it's going to look not as good if it's in your face, you know. So he'll go, okay, well, yeah, but visual effects is saying if we want a large stadium with atmosphere going back and smoke and plumes rising from the distance, you know, they need there. So in the end, yeah, it's a lot of weighing and balancing, and unfortunately, I'm not part of those meetings. But if that helps at all, it's not really your answer. But I actually fast-forwarded a little bit. I was going into another modeling draw call thing. So we have a lot of parts and pieces. And so all those limbs and stuff. For Dead Space 1, we actually did more what you would logically think. If you're going to be cut off here, there's part of your flesh that gets burned off. Like, you know, we have to think about this when we're doing these serious games. Part of your flesh should get burned off, and you'd have a bloody nub on either side. That's, you know, in the real world, that's how it would be. So that's how we built our models. We'd have a chunk that would get burned off, and then we would have a stump on either side. Problem is 1 draw call, 2 draw call, 3 draw calls in the game. And that gets a lot. But in the end, what really mattered is once you cut it off, that you see 2 bloody stumps. You're not going to be analyzing the fact that actually this bloody stump is way up into his shoulder, and this bloody stump is way down here near the end of his sleeve. So if you see the model together, you can see how actually this comes out and that goes in. But you never see that. Because like I mentioned, how about he turns his head off? When he has the helmet on, we don't draw his head. So when he's not cut in half, we don't draw his caps. So you could have a bloody stump sticking out and going all over the place, but it doesn't matter. You don't draw it until you chop, and then we draw it. So it was a way, again, to reduce the draw call. And also, notice a lot more pieces in Dead Space 1. We had 2 on the leg, 2 on the arm. I think we had 13. This is, I believe, the correct number. We had 13 in Dead Space 1. We only have 9 in Dead Space 2. But, you know, when you got 10 people coming at them, it's still a lot of body parts. 9 times 10, that could be 90 body parts, you know. No, eventually we can't draw that many. There actually is a number of parts we can draw. But, and nobody's been complaining so far that they can't cut them at the wrist anymore. So I think it's working out. I guess I did go into a little bit as far as the shaders. How we had to build a more robust shader when I was showing you the face, and how we took all those textures down to a smaller list. Well, we had to build a shader that could support that. So what we ended up doing was creating a sort of set of shaders. Like this one was really simple, and it didn't contain reflection, and it only had a black and white specular pass, and it only did a few things. And we'd start designing a character with this in mind. But then we'd get to a certain point, and we'd think, okay, is this good enough? We'd put it into our little world, we'd spin it around, and we'd look at it, and we'd be like, you know, the way that this is a metal piece of Isaac's plate, it really needs a color reflection. It really needs reflection. So then we would bump it up to the shader. That's pretty much the same, but oh, now you have reflection, and you have reflection control. What's reflective, what's not. Okay? And so now you're looking at it, and you know, but the puker with all that yellow fat and that colored bottle, we really need a colored specular. We really need to give it the, not just white shininess, but that sort of satiny plastic sort, you know. So anyway, so now we're adding a color specular map along with our reflection map. But of course, this is more expensive. So we would look at something and we'd say, okay, do we need this? All right, do we need this? And then we look at our budgets and we go, you know, can't afford that. You know, and then later on in the game, unfortunately near the end, when everything was in the game and everything was running around, a few more characters got bumped down to here. So they looked a little better with their reflections, but give and take, you can't have it all. So yeah. And but versus before, we had a separate shader for eyes and a separate shader for eyelashes and a separate shader for, and so they were sure they were really specific for that thing, but having so many little shaders ended up costing more than having one shader that did more. So, yeah. I don't know. I hear you tech guys like numbers, so I'm throwing you some numbers. Any questions? So yeah, this is final kilobyte size, and this is what we are allowed to have. Now what we're looking at here is only the global stream, so it's only like, it's not a specific environment. So this is what has to load for every single environment in every single game, because you're going to have a player, and the player is going to have weapons, and those weapons are going to make glowy sounds and fireballs and, you know, that sort of thing. So, and this is a lot of what I was doing in my job, especially at the end, when all those last-minute things get put in, and the designers go crazy, and they're like, oh, we can add an extra explosion here, yeah, let's do that. And then it comes back on my plate, and I'm like, no, you can't, seriously. Okay, something's got to go. If you really want that, or you know, then you give and take, and you're arguing. Get those boxing gloves back on. Okay.
When you're doing all this, are you particularly thinking about consoles?
Yeah, different consoles, of course, are better and worse. In characters, we're always working in Xbox, but in environments, they work in PS3. And technical director would tell you exactly why, but PS3 isn't as good in some areas. So if we can do PS3 for environments, then we know we can do Xbox. And for characters, it just builds a little better, it builds a little easier, and we're not pushing the limits so much. So usually if it works in Xbox, you don't have a problem in PS3. So, but we're always, every now and then, you're supposed to step back and build it in the other console, just to be extra sure. But
How much does PC play in any of this?
I love the PC guys. The PC game is a very important part of our SKU. It's awesome, but we do ship a lot of that. We ship it out. We have a studio that we hire at a different location who purely does our PC product. So it's not going to be quite the same game. It's an awesome game, but it might be a little different. So, yeah? Oh, I thought I saw a hand. Anything else? Yes, sir.
Do you leave the PC version open to look a little better than the Xbox or the PlayStation 3, since you have more variety of making your computer more powerful?
Because I work in the consoles, I'll go to the limit again and say, I don't really know that much about the PC version. And I've seen some screenshots and they look gorgeous, but I haven't seen the side-by-side comparisons. So I know it's a very different style of gameplay as far as the controls go and the camera and the motion. And that's come up in some meetings and stuff that we have to set things up a certain way or PC is going to get me mad at us. Yeah. So.
What's the collision budget there for the collision maps? Or?
Collision surface, so physics assigned to a surface. So when you kill somebody, or Isaac dies, right? They fall on the floor, they bounce. Yeah, so there's your physics relations in there. Does he, actually, as far as the player is concerned, well, yeah, I mean, his head goes and things separate, and so it's more like a collision surface physics type.
You know, low-res geometry for everything.
Oh yeah, I'll show you. Don't worry. Is this tech enough for you, or is it too boring? Okay, I could throw some movies in there every now and then if you want. So all this, as I'm talking to you about all this stuff, I'm sure you're picturing me more in the San Francisco studio, but we do have to, I'm sitting in Minneapolis having these conversations via webcam, but I do, during the day I'm working a lot with the San Franciscos, but decisions we make there affect our partners elsewhere. So of course we kind of have to come up with the idea, we have to communicate this idea, we have to send it to them. And although I'm working with a fantastic English speaker, I can't speak directly to a lot of our artists out there. Every now and then there'll be one who'll pipe in if he can, and it's awesome when he does, but or she. So we'll send our notes, they'll get translated. And one thing is pictures are just, pictures say 1,000 words, we all know that, right? But they say 1,000 words no matter what language you speak. So that's been a real important part of our communication. And then of course concept, what the different surfaces are. And this looks much better on my here, of course. Yeah, so they're giving us assets during the night, we're working during the day, there's some overlap, so we use the Perforce versioning system. So that's kind of been our main tool for working with different assets at different times. And of course, then there's always the problem that one of our guys goes home and he still has the asset checked out of Perforce, but they're supposed to work on it in Shanghai. So when they get to work, they can't because it's locked. So of course, there's never anything is perfectly smooth, but we tried it. We tried. So going as far as pictures saying 1,000 words, I had mentioned earlier that concept is so important when we're working with all these teams all over the world. So really pretty pictures, letting them know what the space should look like. So this one, for example, I happen to have one stage. I wanted to get some more stages of development, but I ran out of time. So there's going to be a really boring slide with lots of words in it. But so this is this is at the hospital, so it's the very first room, and it's the very first level. And this is what the concept drawing looked like. And so the level designers would be working with our modeling team that's in San Francisco that will just basically place cubes and stuff and give you a really sort of basic block world space. So there's no textures or anything here, and a lot of these are sort of just, this actually might be better than some of the ones I've seen that are really just more cubes, but this was sort of an example of a really good one that we're going to be sending for some new partners. So you can kind of see the space relationship and stuff and how it fits. So we'll give Shanghai an asset like this, and then we'll tell them to, make it look like that as much as possible. But of course, there's a lot of steps in between, right? So I wish I had more pictures for you, but so we have them go through these different phases. So if you saw here, before we send an art block to them, we have to have, it's done in San Francisco, and it's a spatial relationship. We have the basic camera motions worked out. Interactive objects, like if you have a table or a chair that's really important, it's a key feature of the level, of the playability, then that needs to be in there. Not the exact chair, but a sort of stand-in chair. There will be a chair here, and it'll explode when this happens, whatever. Floor collision in the sense that it has to be a playable space, so you have to have physics on the ground that the guy can stand on and walk on. Navigational graph in the sense that he can't just walk through things either. He has to be stopped when he hits a wall, and things like that. And then just so it is a playable space, you have to have lighting in there to some extent. So they put some basic lights around. And more often near the end, we were trying to give the modelers the best sort of lighting reference that they could, because some of our spaces are really dark and spooky. They'll be practically black, but there'll be a bright glowing light over here. And if you don't know it when you're designing the space, you might make it really pretty where it's black and not pay as much attention where so that, it's a learning experience. So yeah.
What software do the modelers use?
Maya. Okay. We're in Maya house. So, as far as recruiting goes, we hire people who don't necessarily know Maya if you're a good modeler, but we do almost everything through Maya. So, yeah.
Do they ever consult with architects or interior designers when doing this kind of thing?
We have one of our on-site concept artists prior to this, did a lot of architectural 3D design work and stuff. So he's he's one guy we have, but I don't know besides him if we, again, not my department. So you gotta ask me questions I know. Yes.
When you send a block world out and a team is creating assets, do the artists, is there like a modeler and then they hand the model off to a texture, or is it just like?
I'm working with the pod lead, and the pod lead has modelers who are also texture artists. That's how we, in San Francisco, where I'm really more familiar with the team because I speak English and I talk to them all the time, the modelers do the texturing. Okay. But as far as Shanghai goes, they might have separate texture artists, I'm not quite sure, but they get it done and it funnels through the pod lead and he approves. So I'm not exactly, and because they are EA Shanghai, they sometimes like to set things up their own way internally. As long as it sort of follows our structure once it gets to like the pod lead and stuff, we want to give them their independence too. So, yeah?
Concept art is digitally painted like a Photoshop or hand drawn, or do they actually make a 3D environment the way they want it?
For those, they're 2D paintings more often. Now, sometimes what happens is the concept artist will just have like a sketch, like a really loose sketch, and then the level designer will go in and start making a block world like this, and maybe start moving a wall or doing something, and then taking a snapshot of it, going back to the concept artist and saying, draw me something like this, So depending on the space and the for sure idea they have for the space, I guess, is whether or not it goes back and forth and stuff, So like when we're developing a new IP or coming up with new ideas, that's when I think it would be awesome to be a concept artist, because they can just like, so you want this alien world that lives in a fireball, and you want, and they can do whatever they want. But later on, when we're actually building that alien world on a sun planet, then we have to figure out a little bit more detail. So, but some of those early drawings that you see even for this game are just really cool. And some of them we keep and make posters of and that. But yeah, so. Whoop. So you can kind of see the different steps. And between like phase A, before they could move on to phase B, we'd have to have all that sort of working. It'd have to be playable. It'd have to have full collision in the sense that chair, when it tips over, you'll have to tip over correctly and roll on the floor correctly. And detail collision here ended up being a lot of more work for Dead Space 2, because we started doing things like those javelin guns and throwing things. So whether or not the gun would stick into the surface, whether or not the arrow, it's like an arrow or whatever, whether it would stick into the surface or whether it would bounce off the surface. And then there was a set of rules of if the arrow pierced a body part, so now there's a body part halfway through the arrow, now does it stick into the surface or now does it bounce off the surface? And if that body part was something that could explode, but maybe you didn't attach it just right, does it explode when it hits the surface? You can see how that would start to... So we ended up doing a lot of work, and it actually near the end became its own another pass, because you play it here and then you often had to fix it again. And we're almost always checking performance, but different details of performance. Yeah.
What's the meta model of phase A?
Yeah, EA is the first game company I've ever worked at, and I'm still there. So, is meta model purely an EA term, or has everybody heard that expression before? Okay, I wasn't sure. So a meta model is a container that has an object, the visual effects and the properties and personality of that object. So if it's a chair, it can just be a model, it's a chair, okay, but now it has to have the physics for it. Now it has to have everything. When you sit in it, it makes a farting noise, whatever. All those different effects are encapsulated in a meta model. So, and the meta models, again, have different details as you go. Like, obviously, it wouldn't make a smoke and a whoopee cushion sound if it didn't until it got here, but yeah?
This comparison between the phases, like, who would be responsible for, like, exhaustively testing those things were all validated before moving on? Like, how would that process work?
I mostly worked in the character department until near the end when this was getting really busy, and then I came over, and yeah, a lot of it's me. So I'm playing through it, making sure that I'm not getting any errors, making sure it's not breaking, making sure things like when you shoot the javelin gun, does it bounce or insert or explode correctly, things like that. But I'm not concerned is it pretty, which is hard sometimes when you're playing. If something's really ugly, I might say something, but I try to limit to myself, does it work? And at the same time, there's an ADD. If you saw that structure, the pod lead, there's always an ADD. And his job was to make sure, is the spatial relationship right? Does it look pretty? Is it what we want? And so once I'm happy and the ADD is happy, then it goes to the art director and the lead, and then they play through it and disagree with us.
Like end up generating a test plan of that basically, or is it really sort of ad hoc? Sort of?
Oh yeah, we do. I'll show you a little bit. So yeah, okay, working in white boxes. So yeah, there you go. Next slide. So a lot of times it depends on, but if it's let's say it is that whoopee cushion chair, okay, we don't actually have to have it in the whole game and playable for everybody to see. We're still working on it. We're still making that meta model for it. So we work in white boxes. It's like a little mini game, just a couple rooms, a little space, and then you can run around and kick things, sit on things, throw things, stab things, whatever, making sure that they work and stuff, and making sure they're not causing any errors, and making sure, yeah. So that way, if an asset is broken, it's not breaking the game, it's just breaking the white box, and, who cares? You make another little white box over here and figure out why that one's busted, So, and then also when you're in a white box, there's a debug menu, and you can call up every single feature more than you want to know about this object. I don't even know what all the numbers are sometimes. But like here, it looks like, I don't know if you can see, but there's a dead enemy here, and I'm focusing on the arm, and I'm checking what kind of collision havoc physics are on this arm. What kind of collide it has and stuff, and what the settings are for that. So I spend, unfortunately, this is being recorded. No, but I work a lot in white boxes. It's kind of unfortunate, but I get so busy checking things in white boxes that sometimes I have to take a step back and actually play the game every now and then and see how it's coming and look at that final product, because so many times we're kind of in our little space here, I'm sure it's just the same with so many art projects, right? You get your corner, and every now and then you have to go, oh, look, there's all this stuff going on. So, does that answer your question? Okay. Yeah?
I just have a question about the meta model. So the meta model is sort of like the prototype from which more specific versions are built. So like you say, chair, generic chair, and then dual and whatever, or how does that? Okay.
Prototypes will feed into the meta model, but it's pretty much the same. So yeah. And the archetype is a whole assembly of things that'll go into the prototype, which feeds into the meta model. So the archetype is a lot of the behaviors and stuff. Tracking environments. Yeah. I'm an artist who is really good at Excel now. So what phase is it in? How long did it take to get done? How long was it supposed to take to get done? Who's working on it? Notes or comments coming in from Shanghai, coming in from us. Question about this, where to find an example of that. All of that. This was like 400 and some lines long, and that's just for objects. Never mind, each chapter had their own page for the zone and the levels with the walls and the floors and stuff. So we're already researching, there's this shotgun software. It's for tracking assets and stuff, and I've been doing some of that lately, trying to figure out if that'll work better than this, because although this is functional, it can get to be a headache.
Is this just for you, or do you actually share this?
But it's checked into Perforce, so everybody looks at it. And some people are responsible for different parts. So like the environment manager will more be like, okay, we want it done here. It starts this date and goes this date. So different people might be in charge of different columns. Yeah. But a lot of it is keeping track of. Yeah.
So the box up there, did you just say that was a note that came out?
Yeah. So anything that has a little triangle next to it here means there's
grief.
additional notes attached.
That's a note from just that one box.
Yes.
Oh, geez,
yes. And every one of these triangles. I picked kind of a bigger one just to accentuate how much of a pain it is. But there are some, and then over here, so here's some of these. Here's some of these. These are additional notes. So sometimes you'd come here and these would get like too huge, and you'd be like, oh, that's ridiculous. So then you would add additional notes here. And often the reason why it was here is because if it went over budget or over time, this is saying how much it went over time, and then this is saying why. So
most of this is
I'm not saying this is good.
A lot of this is time budget. This is very similar to what I do for a living.
Okay.
So that's why, especially the stuff on the left, where when was it supposed to get done? When did it get done? Who got it done?
Yeah. Check out this is awesome.
Okay.
Shotgun Studios. Well, I'm learning it right now, so I'm doing all this. I'm getting all the sales pitches. Once I dig into it and get to know it better for real, I might change my mind.
Why is it cooler?
Each one of these is its own like little index card. And so you can filter and sort all your little cards, and you can have, and each card has links to all these notes, or it can be separate emails, and it sends links to, it's just.
It's more of a database than this.
Yeah, more of a database than a spreadsheet. Yeah. Now that would be a good way. But it's very visual based, so for artists, yeah. So, have you used it?
No, but
okay.
I know why would be better.
So what am I doing today now that the game is done? That's one of the things I'm doing. Trying to figure out a better way. And then, of course, we'd be doing the feedback. Now, you saw a little bit of the comment stock for characters, where we, had the head popping off and whatever. that's a little straightforward, that's a little more easy. When you're talking about an environment, you might be like, oh, did this get done? Look at this here, and you can't even, it's like, okay, no, when I commented about that, I meant you to do this over here, it didn't get done. I mean, you could just see, this would take a lot of time. And so I'd be doing some of it, and I came on to environments late, but the gal who was doing a lot of this, she was just pulling her hair out at times. And then, of course, it's translated. This green is all Chinese here.
So are these examples of what you're trading back and forth and looking at?
Yeah.
So is this like one big page, or is this like 3 pages?
Yeah, this is one really long JPEG.
Okay.
And each line is another day. So this, we reviewed the asset this day, and then it came back the next day. And
How do you make these? How do you, when you're just working? How do you make these? In Photoshop? Or?
You grab a snapshot of the game, and then draw on it in Photoshop. And then
so you're writing these notes inside of Photoshop?
Kind of, yeah. I do. I don't know. Well, I have a what is it called? GrabMe, and it makes snapshots of your screen.
But how are you getting the text done and the check marks and all that stuff?
Photoshop.
Yeah, in Photoshop. Wow, this is cool.
I didn't actually do this one. Diana did this one, and she's with the checks. I have a whole bunch of different arrow tools I use with my line tool, and I'm like throwing lines all over. She actually takes her pen and does this, but to each their own.
This is something I've never seen before. This is fascinating.
Well, it's okay, but when you get really busy, this was too time consuming. We need to figure out a way to get them their feedback faster. You know, this is fine when you're not really in the throes of, oh my God, we have a deadline, we gotta get this done. So then what we started doing was...
Looking really good. I think what we have to do is add a lot more of your welds, because the welds actually look really good. So put them just more in the player's view. So around here, you just like load it up.
So the advantage of this is, number one, it was quick. You just hold the camera up and get it done. And secondly, we found after we started doing this, that Shanghai really appreciated it because they didn't realize, the dude's shining his flashlight on that? I didn't realize you would actually be, going at that. Oh, that's a bad example, but for example, they didn't realize how we were actually viewing their assets. So that answered more questions than we realized needed to be answered. Yeah?
Do the teams in Shanghai, do they get playables of the game at any time?
Oh yeah, every day. They get the latest build, and we have a server over there, so we build it every night, and then as soon as it's done at California time, I'll talk. As soon as it's done in California, it gets zipped over there. So by their afternoon, they're getting the latest build, and yeah.
How do you mimic, when you're playtesting like that, where you want to add more welds and whatnot, how do you mimic what the Xbox can handle? Like, do you playtest on the Xbox? And
yeah.
How do you call up certain objects in your white box? How do you call up objects then?
How do you call up? What do you mean?
Well, how do you bring in objects into your white box?
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, wait, coming. So we have this tool we call Neo. And it's basically our in-house game engine. It's where we put all the meta models together and where we associate behaviors and reactions and different events to our meta models. And it's a game engine. You know what a game engine does, right? So what's really cool about this is as you're working and you're building your models and importing your floors and setting your collision and all that stuff, it actually can send any sort of visual stuff you're doing. It actually brings it into Maya, so you can actually put it where you want to put it. And then, of course, that'll give you a set of coordinates. While you're moving it here, there'll be a little matrix here, and the numbers will be updating. So they talk back and forth to each other. So if you're setting up something like a white box, for example, this was really fun. Yeah, okay, I can see, yeah. So I set up a white box for characters, okay? We had all these corpses. Corpses lined up. And rather than putting each one in Maya and moving it over one unit, I was able to just create a corpse and move it over one unit here. I didn't even have to look in Maya. I know that it's just one unit in Y. So I did that. So we had 30, I don't know, a lot of corpses lined up in a row. And we were testing the physics on them. So when you shoot them, does their head fall off and does it explode? So you would go down the line and you go boom, 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 okay. And then what happened is at first, a lot of them weren't exploding. We were checking it. We were trying to make sure. So you have all these heads rolling around on the ground. And then we discovered it was really fun to take a head and bowl with it. Like just, throw it. Yeah. So that was fun. And then eventually we had to get them all exploding and stuff. But I was showing, I work with, not Shanghai, but it was Beijing was the characters. And so I actually had a little video and I was showing it. By the way, if you really want to have fun testing this stuff, we did this with the heads. You got to do it with the arms and whatever else you're testing. It's really fun. And they sent us a video back where they'd actually had set up the heads like a bowling alley. So anyway. We make mini games out of our mini games. But I was out of focus. What is it? Okay, yeah, so they talk to each other, which is really neat. And other way around too. So when you're setting up things like collision and stuff, we have tools in Maya that'll create a certain type of collision for you. Whether it explodes when the javelin hits it, whether it's impalable, whether the javelin goes through it, a variety of things. Is it what kind of sound it makes too? So if it's a metal and you clunk it, it'll make a different sound than if it's plastic and you clunk it. You know, so all those sort of controls. So this is basically just a big Mel script that we call a little UI, and then we pick the one you want. You say go, and it brings this material shader ball into Maya. Then you assign your material shader ball to some collision geo you have, which is usually a really rough representation of the real geo. And then while you're doing this, and you assign it, then you can go back into Neo, and you'll actually see, like, you know, collision geo here set, and it'll be a different color, and you'll see that, okay, so this collision geo is good. So that's how the environment artists are working back and forth. Did that answer your question? Huh?
Who created the elsewhere?
And I think those are, I actually did a couple pieces of it. I had to add a little feature here and there, but the bulk of it was kind of there when I got there. I'm going to guess our TD, our lead. The same one that's in the meeting saying who gets what, because he also does a lot of our technical. I write some tools, but not that one. That was a good one. Huh?
Is that written in .NET?
I didn't write it. Sorry. I don't know. But this is before, this has been around for years, so it was before Python. So, and I do know. I've added a few features to it. It's just Mel.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, because that's a .NET property now.
Yeah.
Who actually sets up the collision meshes? Is that done by the level designer?
That's done. No, that's done by the modelers, whether they be San Francisco, Shanghai, or wherever. It was phase A, and actually, the block world had to have some basic collision because I just had to stand on the floor. I mean, in order to have a playable level, you have to have some physics in there. But before we would complete phase A, it has to have all this stuff going on. This is a big metal room, according to this example. It's just metal everywhere, but you know, it had to have. Yeah, and then of course there's the real, collision materials is one thing, but then there's of course real materials, you know, what does it look like? Pretty with specular and normal map and all that stuff. So we have our shaders, shader tool, and this is written in-house. You assign your textures, you import your textures, you assign them here. And for a lot of the environments, each of these is a material. For a lot of your environments, if you notice some characters, I have a lot more here, slider controls. I could say, oh, make the metal shinier, make the specular brighter. Well, that's great for characters, but they don't give that to environments because there's just too many of them. And every time you would adjust a shader control here, it's a new draw call. So they gotta always limit that stuff. So they really have to do all their work in textures. If they want something shinier, they have to make it brighter in the texture. So we can slide a little slider, we as in characters. And so to make their lives a little bit easier, there's a whole set of tools for Photoshop. So they can work, make it brighter, just push a button, and it exports, it goes out, it feeds into here, and then I'm hopefully going to try to remove this stuff, but move this step. But they export for Photoshop, it feeds into here, and then they have to push a button in here that says I want to view it in the game. The little thing I'm working on is I don't want that button. I want if you export it and you push the button here, it'll be viewable in game. So that way you can sort of have this even, it'll have to be open, but it can sort of be down here. You know. As it is, you have to find your texture and say view. Anyway.
So how many textures and UVs sets they got for the model, yeah?
One UV set per, well, it depends on the complexity, but most of the time. Yeah, like to keep it.
Yeah, I didn't notice much detailed textures.
Yeah, some, I mean, again, if it's a hero chair, or like in the beginning there's a guy, he's on a table, examination table, and there's lasers pointing at his crotch and you get real close to it. Yeah, that has a couple textures on it. Like if it's a hero item, it might get more attention, but yeah. And the thing is that's an LD. We modeled the face. We didn't want to take an actor and do that to him in the beginning of the game if you played. It's a really kind of gruesome scene. The guy dies and he's on a table and yeah, he gets this blood everywhere, and yeah. So we took one of the LDs on our team and modeled him, and stuck him in there. This is my tools. Okay, I have to show off my tools a little bit. So working with Shanghai, of course, or whoever, even San Francisco, I would get assets in and you'd see the same common problems sometimes. And there'd be things that you could actually just have a computer check for. Like, if you can read this, like, do you have more than one object with the same name? Are you using zero length normals? Do you have non-convex polys? Do you have a hole in your geometry? Or you have more than 5 faces coming into one point? Do you have, stuff like that? So I wrote this little tool because I was tired of checking it myself. So I wrote a tool, and now I send this out, and before you send me an asset, it better get a clean bill of health from this tool. And if it doesn't, I'm going to be the naming convention Nazi, and I'm going to tell you to fix it. This is for stuff that the computer can just check and fix for. But there's a lot of things, of course, that you need hands-on. You can't just... So this is a tool that will help you see stuff. Like one of the, it'll make a bright purple background, and if you're looking at your object and you see a purple spot through it, you're like, oh, look, there's a hole there. Let's fix that, So, and just, they make all your normals actually huge. Make sure if you're going around, you see them in the right space. Check your pivot points, make sure they're in the proper places, and stuff like that.
So these are tools that you wrote that the modelers use? To check the artists use to check their stuff before they send it. Very cool.
We don't have modelers and texture artists as much as they're the same. Gotcha. Yeah?
Well, it's kind of off topic, you might have answered already, but are you guys exclusively Maya, or do you do Max as well?
We have a lot of proprietary stuff, but for 3D, we're Maya. Yeah. Like I said, we're not a...
tools that you just designed here, is that only for your company?
Yeah. I am property VA. I don't think I can take it with me, unfortunately.
What did you write then?
I need to learn Python better. But I know Mal really good. So these are all in Mal, and I know, that's another thing I'm doing right now, is I'm doing some Python tutorials. I need to get better at it. So, everyone tells me it's so much better, so. But it's hard when you know something really well.
I still write stuff in C#.
Yeah.
It's because I can do it while I'm sleeping.
Well, there you go.
I get more done that way.
I gotta say though, probably if I may boast the Photoshop tools and how I manipulate textures and create all the Photoshop tool set, that actually was submitted for a patent as part of EA and approved. So I hold a patent for a Photoshop tool set and how that's written and stuff in the United States and in the US. So a little plaque on my wall. I got a bonus, and I got business cards that say inventor on them.
Oh, very cool.
So this is, you can't see it. It's really funny. There's red blood splatter everywhere. So the idea of this, I was just going to say, so hopefully if you use my tools, things don't fall apart and become a big mess. Almost done, guys. So I was just going to say that obviously all this work we've been doing has been proving itself pretty good. Really, really excited. Within the first week, we were the #1 sales for worldwide. So this report was as of January 29th. We were #1 and #2 for 316 PS. This, I had to update my snapshot. Yesterday we were at 90 and today we're at 89. I don't know, I gotta look. I was too busy today. I gotta look, but somebody gave us a bad review. If he's from Game Informer, you tell him I know where they live. And then, so that's happiness. And then I was just going to throw this little in there, go buy Dead Space today. So questions?
Would you say that Dead Space 1 looked prettier than Dead Space 2 because you guys took some of the assets away from the way it looked to make the game?
I think I showed you some of the compromises we did in characters, but environments did some really amazing things. We gave them a little more space, and they took that really far. Like there's a lot more bigger spaces and more details and atmosphere, and so I actually like that, like the variety of spaces and the skyscapes in the background. Like you look out the windows and you see an entire cityscape. That is really cool. I like that better. Spec normal and diffuse color, we call it, but spec, with the Photoshop tools, I guess I kind of glossed past it, isn't just spec. Sometimes we compress our channels. So it's a one texture that we call specular, but in each channel, because an RGB image, right, contains 3 channels. And so we'll have one channel will control brightness of specular, one channel will control exponent or wideness of specular, another channel will control reflection map, what's reflective, what's not. So although we say it's one texture, it's really sort of 3 textures jammed into one. And that was how we were able to do a lot of with the newer shaders. We were to get more control with one texture by cramming all that in.
Did that shader control glossiness as well?
Yes, that's the exponent, glossy, shininess, power, so many different words for it. Spread, yeah, same thing, yeah. Whether it's waxy or polished, yeah, that would be in the specular.
It's the exponent.
The exponent. But when I call it exponent, people look at me like, so I changed it to shininess. And then we hired a new.
An algebra class.
I used to do shaders, and I love doing shaders, but I just got so busy with other stuff that we actually hired a new shader artist, and he started using terms like exponent, and I totally understood him. But then we started writing that as like UIs in the shader code, or in the shader UI, and artists were like, what?
And
so it's a different language.
But if you teach an artist what the exponent actually does and do it, then they'll actually understand that spread thing is relatively useless. It's this really jive-ass.
So now we have a problem is some code calls it exponent, some calls it shininess, and then you go into a different game and they call it something else, I forget, but yeah, there's like different words for the same thing. Yeah?
I'm interested in the growth of the technical artist as a field. I'm interested in how that has changed during your
Well, actually, I was going into that as far as I came in from a real art background. But then, so I worked in the characters for 2002, 2003, but then they put me on environments for 04, 05. And I'm sorry, but a golf course is a golf course. It's a grassy field, and I don't care if it's St. Andrews or Pebble Beach or whatever. It's a lot of the same thing. And so they had me setting lights and painting tree shadows for every course on every hole. And then for 2005, it was every course for every hole for every time of day. Okay, I was going nuts. I am not a repetitive monster, the computer is. So that's when I started scripting. That's when I'm like, I gotta figure out a better way to do this.
What was your title when you were doing that?
I was a lighter.
Okay, you were a
I
lighter.
went from surface artist to surface artist lighter, and then technical artist sort of just happened because...
Did you make that name up?
Technical artist?
Yeah.
No, it's a term that's out there, yeah.
GDC this year is having a 1 whole day training session on technical artists.
Yeah.
1 whole day of the training is dedicated to what is a technical artist, where do they come from, how do you find them, because there's not like school for it.
Yeah,
but right, it's a burgeoning field, and I guess the reason I'm interested is because on the sound side of things, there's an emerging technical sound designer, which is very analogous to what you're doing, where it works very specifically with the technical side of things. On the art side, I definitely see it as a field that has grown over the last few years to the point where, you can have a talk and you can be a technical artist and you can have a group of people who are your colleagues, right? And I guess I'm interested if that was always the case, if you've seen that growing over time.
I think it used to be, when I first got into games, an engineer, a programmer, wrote tools for artists. And there's a big communication mismatch. Because, they would use words like exponent and an artist would use words like shiny and they'd be talking about the same thing, but they wouldn't even know it. So that's what I found I was doing a lot. Because I came from a background where I was coding more at Lamb & Company and Rhythm & Hughes, I was rendering and creating stuff without a UI at Rhythm & Hughes originally. So I understood both languages, so I could translate. Yeah?
I'm not sure if you're saving this for the end, but do you have any advice for people who want to get into the art side of video games?
On the art side, I would say if you try to be a master of everything, you'll be a master of nothing. So you really have to focus on one area. Be an animator, or be a surface artist, or be a modeler. I think there's too many folks in school who try to do everything, and then they do nothing very well. And when we're hiring an animator, or we're hiring a modeler who's really good at making low poly characters. I don't care if you make a really good low poly character, but your animation is crap. We don't care. We're hiring a low poly character creator. So that's biggest advice, I guess I'd say. Yeah?
How many lights per room?
Oh, lights? I'm not a lighter anymore. A lot.
Because I was wondering how.
You look on YouTube on the Dead Space page. There is a great little video that they interview some of the lighters, and they talk about how many lights there were in the room. Yeah.
two questions. One, with the video feedback and like the sketched images and stuff, how did, were those sent? Did you just throw those in a ProTours, or did you have some other software you actually used for?
Well, the problem would be sometimes with the video feedback is when you're in a room and you're doing video feedback, somebody makes a joke, you start chatting about what you had for dinner that day, you joke about some side issue, and then you're like, oh, no, okay, let's get back to it. What were we doing? Da, da, da. You don't need Asians to see all that. So what unfortunately started happening is, and mostly it was faster. It was a lot faster than building those JPEGs. But still, you know, poor Diana became a video editor, you know, because she'd have to like take those clips and cut them out, and then you know, cut out these comment and that comment, and then also, of course, in a dailies review, you look at this thing, and then you look at the next thing, and then you look at the next thing. But we had to separate that out to the right artist, to the right pod lead, right? Because the pod lead for the chair doesn't care about the back room closet. So, yeah. So, I don't. Did that answer your question? We would we'd have links. We put it on Perforce, and then there'd be a link in an email or a spreadsheet, or that would go to it.
Yeah,
so.
and then kind of the other segueing into the question of talk about like a lot of really cool stuff you did to solve those problems. I was wondering though if you would feel free to talk about any particular pain points that came up, and especially like working remotely with multiple teams.
Any particular what points? Sorry.
Just pain points, like difficulties you encountered in the process.
Time zone. I'm going to stand on my little pedestal for a moment and say, people have said I'm really successful in working with partners all over, and that's because I'm willing to work late in the night, and I'm willing to be flexible. It doesn't matter where you are, it's all about when you are. So the problem with miscommunication that would happen so much is because they'd have a question, but they'd have to wait an entire day to get feedback, and they would send an email, and maybe the email is misinterpreted or not answered correctly, sent back, they didn't get their answer, it's another day. No, this team's angry at that team for not getting the work done, this team is angry at that team for not telling them what they need to do, and it's all. If somebody were to just log on at 1 in the morning and answer a question, it could solve so much pain. So that's a bit of a sticky point. And because I'm out here and I work from home anyway, it's really not much trouble for me to grab my laptop, that laptop, and answer, IM for a minute or two. Versus going into the office or somebody who, I'm willing to do it because I guess I got a good deal here too. So I'm a little more flexible because they let me come out here. So that's a pretty picture. So, okay.
Thanks everybody for coming. I think I put on the note that there's some beers near here. It's going to get a little crowded if you all go, but you can stand outside in the cold. The easiest way to get there, it's a place called Sports Page. Just go north on James, hang a right on 94th at the stop sign, across the freeway, and it's right there under the Giant Bear strip mall. Anybody know what that mall's called?
I think you missed the turning onto Lindale part.
Did I?
Yeah.
All right, you tell me.
I might be wrong. I'm getting old, but.
Well, we'll map it on the phone if you want.
You go down to 98. You go down to 98.
I'm sending them north.
Go across the highway.
North
and
instead of
turn
south.
Left, north onto Lindale.
You're going a long way. It's hopeless.
It's on.
The one thing I forgot to tell everybody, if you're going to GDC, I appreciate you to show up in March and just give a little 2-minute spiel about the coolest thing you saw.